Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our grade 12 English home language session. I see there's still a few people signing up. We'll give about 2 minutes and give them a chance to all join in the session. Okay, it actually now says it's 100%, so we can carry on. Good morning again. I'm Wendy Peplet, Chief Education Specialist of Languages. You will note that my camera is off. This is due to weak signal and the sound is better without it on. So just focus and listen carefully. Before we begin this webinar, let's cover some basics. If you are struggling to hear me, make sure your audio is on and your speaker volume is turned up. You will automatically be muted when joining the session. Should you have any questions, you can ask your question in the question box below. Download this presentation in the handout box below or on your right. You can do it now or at the end of your session. You will also find all this information in the question box below or on your right. Remember to send us your questions. Attendees are encouraged to ask questions and leave comments. However, irrelevant or inappropriate comments will result in the attendee being dismissed from the session. If we did not get to your question, please send an email to academics@impoc.co.za. Questions in the question box will be answered and made available afterwards. If you did not receive the questions and answers, please send an email to info@impoc.co.za. You can also visit the IMPOC YouTube channel for recordings of the session, but they have also been uploaded onto our webpage, so you can also download them from our webpage. To start off with, I am once again going to go through what can be expected in the June examinations. You will be able to download your June examinations if you have not received the email yet from the 1st of July. You will be able to write these examinations at your own time, and the memorandums will be supplied to you. They will not form part of your SPA mark, but it is very important that you actually do write these examinations as a revision session of the first half of the year. And also very, very important before writing your prelims, especially with English, as everything has been covered by the June examination. What do you need to study for paper 2? Your poems. Edward, The Going, The Good Morrow, and Death Shall Have No Dominion. Toads, I Have My Father's Voice. Sonnet 146, Naming of Parts, The Child Dying, The Loss of India, Visiting Room, Remembrance, and then, of course, your notes on answering an unseen poem. Then you must study the entire The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry and your drama, Long Day's Journey into Night. For sample questions, previous exam papers can be found on my.impoc. For paper 2, you will not find sample papers on the internet, as it is not the same literature that is studied by the DBE schools. But for papers 1 and 2, you can certainly download old exam papers from the internet as well, from the DBE. Study notes can also be sourced from the internet on these books. Now today we are going to discuss the last poem of the year, Remembrance by Emily Bront. You will find this poem on page 151 of the study guide. Background to this poem. This poem is an elegy, a poem written to express grief about the death of a loved one, to lament the loss of a loved one, not to be confused with a eulogy, which is the speech made at a funeral to praise the one who has died. In an elegy, the speaker usually laments the loss of the loved one, but a sense of consolation may be reached by the end of the poem. This poem has elements of that convention, and it is this factor, perhaps, that gives the elegy its power. The speaker in the poem mourns her loved one, but does not claim that she has him constantly in her thoughts 15 years later. She has not found another lover and has never betrayed their love, but she has continued to live in the sense of not having locked herself away from the world. She has remained firmly in it, experiencing desires and hopes, even though she is not happy. Note, it is highly unlikely that the speaker is the poet herself, because she was only 27 when the poem was published and would have been 12 when the lover mentioned had died. The situation described is part of the fantasy world that the Bronte sisters created. Let's read the poem. Cold in the earth, the deep snow piled above thee, far, far removed, cold in the dreary grave. A dreary grave would be cheerless, desolate, bleak. Have I forgot my only love, to love thee? Severed at last by time's all-severing wave. Severed, in other words, cut off, separated. Now when alone do my thoughts no longer hover, float around over the mountains on that northern shore, resting their wings where heath and fern leaves cover. It's a erica plant, or part of the erica plant family. Thy noble heart forever, evermore. Cold in the earth, and 15 wild Decembers from those brown hills have melted into spring. Faithful indeed is the spirit that remembers, after such years of change and suffering. Sweet love of youth, forgive if I forget thee, while the world's tide is bearing me along. Other desires and other hopes beset me. You get beset by troubles from all directions. Hopes which obscure. If something is obscured, it is difficult to see it, but cannot do thee wrong. No later light has lightened up my heaven. No second morn has ever shone for me. All my life's bliss from thy dear life was given. All my life's bliss is in the grave with thee. But when the days of golden dreams had perished, and even despair was powerless to destroy. Despair is when you have despair, when you are feeling hopeless. Then did I learn how existence could be cherished, strengthened and fed without the aid of joy. Then did I check the tears of useless passion, weaned my young soul from yearning after thine. When a baby is weaned or an animal is weaned, it is taken off its mother's milk. Sternly denied its burning wish to hasten down to that tomb already more than mine. And even yet, I dare not let it languish. If something languishes, it weakens. Dare not indulge in memory's rapturous pain. Dare not spoil oneself or provide great joy. out of the pain. Once drinking deep of thy divinest anguish, anguish, great pain, suffering. How could I seek the empty world again? The structure of the poem. The poem comprises 8 stanzas with 4 lines each. The poet has used a regular A-B rhyme scheme, though each stanza has its own A-B rhymes. In other words, if we ask you to give the rhyme scheme of stanza 2, it would be C-D, C-D. Occasionally, regular iambic pentameter comes to the fore, but the rhythm does vary. Repetition in this poem is quite common, perhaps to convey the way in which the speaker must have had these thoughts going round and round in her head as she mourned her lover and disciplined herself to stop thinking of him, and then doubted her faithfulness towards him. Let's analyze stanza 1. Cold in the earth, and the deep snow piled above thee. Far, far removed, cold in the dreary grave. There we find alliteration of the F sound. Far, far. Have I forgot my only love to love thee? The poet is speaking to someone not there. It could either be a dead object or not a human object, but speaking to someone not there, which then says it is an apostrophe. Severed at last by time's all-severing wave. Here we find a personification of time by the capital letter, time. So time has been personified as being human, therefore the capital letter. The speaker describes the grave of a loved one in dismal terms. Cold, with deep snow piled above, far, far removed, cold in the dreary grave. We expect expressions of grief to follow. It seems that the speaker has forgotten this person so far removed. The tie between them has been severed, an abrupt, somewhat violent and permanent cut, the separation made more severe. Note the play on words probably intended by the poet, by the passage of time. Stanza 2. Now, when alone, do my thoughts no longer hover over the mountains on that northern shore, resting their wings where heath and fern leaves cover thy noble heart forever, evermore. Here we find a metaphor. Resting their wings, thy noble heart forever. In other words, comparing the heart to the resting wings. The speaker reflects on her memory of him. She does not think of him, nor do her thoughts dwell on him. They no longer hover over his grave. This does not mean that he is no longer important to her, however. Note that she still speaks of his noble heart. It's a synecdoche, which is covered forever. Her regret at his passing is still clearly evident. Consider the effect of the metaphor in these lines. Her thoughts are compared to birds in flight, temporarily resting their wings and hovering above the place where he is buried. This effectively depicts how the vivid picture of him in his grave, far away over the mountains, could have constantly remained in her thoughts, not moving on and leaving him behind. Nevertheless, her thoughts did move on. A very good examination question would be to explain this metaphor or to explain the effect of the metaphor. Stanza 3. Cold in the earth and 15 wild Decembers from those brown hills have melted into spring. Faithful indeed is the spirit that remembers, after such years of change and suffering. Brings a repetition of the sad fact that he is cold in the earth. Remember, it started off in stanza 1, the cold, and has been for 15 years. The spirit that is faithful enough to remembers after such years of change and suffering could be a defense of herself. She has undergone difficult years since his death and does remember the poem after all. The poem is entitled Remembrance. She laments, in other words, she's sorry that she is not faithful enough to remember as another may have done. Her apology in line 13, which we will come to when I page over, seems to confirm this, as if she has been weighed and found wanting by not remembering him constantly. Sweet love of youth, forgive if I forget thee. While the world's tide is bearing me along, other desires and other hopes beset me. Hopes which obscure but cannot do thee wrong. Her deep love for him is still evident, sweet love. For a moment we wonder if she remembers him only because he was her first young love. Perhaps she has moved on from there. She asks his forgiveness, suggesting that she is forgetful because she is still in the world. How this contrasts with line 2, far, far removed. It seems as if she has gone with the flow, so to speak, and lived, entertaining desires and hopes. But the stanza finishes with the exclamation that although hopes may have obscured her memories of him, she cannot do thee wrong. She has never betrayed their love. This is foreshadowed, in fact, in line 3, where she addressed her loved one by the apostrophe as my only love. If you noted the only, you would be a step ahead in knowing that there has been no other since him. The mood in the first 4 stanzas. She is remembering her love who died 15 years ago, but apologizing for not remembering him, or not remembering him as she ought to. This confusion of thoughts is reflected in the style of the writing, and punctuation is a clue. Look how she alternates between exclamations and questions, lines 2, 4, 8, 12, and 16. She exclaims how far away her love is from life, from her, and asks if he is also far from her thoughts. She interrogates herself about this forgetting, and then exclaims again how long it has been, and how difficult it would be to remain faithful all this time. She asks forgiveness and defends herself. This is a good indication that she is racked with guilt and despair. Her tortured feelings are conveyed too by the slow pace of the poem. Look at the dashes breaking the flow of lines 1 and 9. The commas slowing down lines 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 11, 13, and 16. Notice too the long vowel sounds that contribute to the slow, tortured wrangling with her feelings. Lines 1 to 2 are enough to make the point. Cold, earth, deep, snow, piled, far, removed, dreary, and grave. Stanza 5. No later light has lightened up my heaven. Light has lightened up my heaven is a metaphor, but we also find alliteration of the L, later, light, lightened. No second morn has ever shone for me, another metaphor. All my life's bliss from thy dear life was given. All my life's bliss is in the grave with thee. The mood here changes slightly. The speaker becomes more certain of her ground and realizes that she need not feel guilty. She has not betrayed their love by finding a new lover. The metaphors in lines 17 to 18 show this. No later light, a new lover, has lightened up my heaven, brightened her day. This declaration is repeated in line 18, where no second morn has shone for her. All her life's bliss was provided by his love, and now lies buried in the grave with him. That's quite powerful. It means that she has dwelt figuratively in darkness or twilight since his death. Metaphorically, the sun has never risen again to bring her blissful happiness. Stanza 6. But when the days of golden dreams had perished, and even despair was powerless to destroy. Despair was powerless to destroy. Personification. Then did I learn how existence could be cherished, strengthened and fed without the aid of joy. We start to understand the despair of the speaker and recognize that she has not forgotten her love, even if she does not think of him. She may have experienced other desires and hopes since his death, but there is no joy in them. In line 21, we learn that her golden dreams had perished with him. She has no joy in her life. Lines 22 and 23 seem a bit contradictory. Despair was powerless to destroy. She has personified despair by using a proper noun and referring to its power. Her loved one had died. Her golden dreams had perished. But the despair that she felt was not enough to kill her too. Despair was not powerful enough to destroy her. So she learned the hard lesson that existence, being alive, was something one was supposed to appreciate and value, to cherish, not wish away. She has managed to do that, but has never regained the happiness that she had with him. Stanza 7. Then did I check the tears of useless passion, weaned my young soul from yearning after thine, sternly denied its burning wish to hasten down to that tomb already more than mine. The speaker gains the strength to overcome her lover's death and matures in the process. She disciplined herself to move on with her life and not spend it in fruitless yearning after him. The diction, just a reminder, diction is words, shows her strength. Then did I check. She stopped her tears and weaned my young soul from him. She is older and wiser, having undergone this tragedy. Weaned points both to her youth and to the gradual process of being able to go on without him. Sternly denied its burning wish to hasten to that tomb, confirms her wish to die expressed in line 22 and shows the self-discipline involved in overcoming it. Stanza 8. And even yet I dare not let it languish, dare not indulge in memory's rapturous pain. Here we have an oxymoron. Once drinking deep of that divinest anguish, another oxymoron. How could I seek the empty world again? She is not confident that she has irreversibly won the battle. Even yet, even today, in other words, she dare not let it languish. She dare not let go and indulge in her memories of their love, memories that would be rapturous plain. If she did relax her control, even once, to drink deep of that divinest anguish, she knows that she would not be able to regain it and to return to her joyless life in a world empty of him. We can conclude that if she were to indulge her memories, she would possibly end up dying of a broken heart, or worse still, doing away with herself. Note the oxymorons in lines 30 and 31. How can pain be rapturous? How can anguish be given the superlative case of the adjective divinest? Strong contradictions. Summary. This is a poem about love and loss. The speaker says she is only just getting over the death of her loved one, some 15 years previously. Yet she has convinced herself that she will never feel whole again without her loved one, and cannot face the empty world without him by her side. That was the last poem for the year. Then all 12 have been completed. The first ones were completed in term 1. Now I want to again look at how to approach an unseen poem. Question 5 of your examination paper is an unseen poem, and it is compulsory. And there is definite ways of approaching an unseen poem. But to be able to approach an unseen poem, you need to know all your figures of speech, any other sound devices, etc., because you are going to have to analyze it yourself. You would have to be able to identify meanings of diction and of the tone of the poem, etc. As I said, it is a compulsory question, question 5. To start off, read the title of the poem. In other words, what is the poem likely to be about? Read the poem at least twice. While reading, take note of what is happening in each stanza. At this point, you can actually make a note next to each stanza to remind yourself what it is about. Take note of any words, phrases repeated. If phrases or words are repeated, they normally mean there is something important. And it normally indicates the central theme or gives away the message of the poem. Think about tone, mood, atmosphere of the poem. Is it a positive or negative connotations of dictions, the words used? Are they positive or negative? Think about the purpose. What is the message that is being conveyed through the poem? Take note of the type of poem. Read all the questions. Answer the questions in as much detail as possible. Here I want to give you another tip. When you read the questions, underline the doing words, the verbs, because that is what you are going to look for in your answers. Look at the mark allocation. That is very important. If something counts 3 marks, you know that you must have 3 definite things, or at least 2 very well explained, because if you answer a question, you have to explain your answer. Analyzing poems, theme or main idea. Every poem has a theme or main idea and conveys the message or intentions of the poet. The poem may be a narrative which tells a story, or a lyric which describes the personal feelings of the poet. What is the form of the poem? In other words, its structure. A poem has a specific form. Poems are usually written in lines which may be grouped into stanzas. Poems do not necessarily have to be divided into stanzas and may also be written as single entities, in other words, one long poem. In free verse, the poet defines his own form. There are no restrictions on rhythm, rhyme, or pattern. Literal and figurative language. Literal language says exactly what it means. Figurative language relies on simile, metaphors, imagery, connotation, and implication to say more than what the actual words themselves mean. Diction, the word choice. The poet's use of words creates the mood or atmosphere and sets the poem in its correct time and place. Remember, the poet has chosen certain words rather than others. They have also placed them in a certain order to suit their purpose. The words then combine with one another to produce an effect. It is important to study the poet's diction to understand the way the poem works. Tone. The tone is the poet's attitude towards their subject and their readers. Tone helps to create the desired mood or atmosphere. This is achieved by word choice as well as the rhythm and sounds of the words. The tone may be friendly, sharp, sarcastic, ironic, angry, humorous, or condescending. Rhythm. As in music, poetry often has a rhythm or a flow. The rhythm sets the pace of the poem and should match the meaning. A slow rhythm would reinforce a somber meaning, and a quicker rhythm could reflect a happy mood. Poetic devices such as onomatopoeia, alliteration, and assonance influence the pace and the pause of the poem. When you read a poem aloud, you can feel the change of pace and how this affects the mood of the poem. Meter. Meter is a unit of rhythm in poetry, the pattern of the beats. It is also called a foot. Each foot has a certain number of syllables, usually 2 or 3. The difference in types of meter is which syllables are accented and which not. Rhyme. Rhyme refers to the repetition of similar sounds, usually a vowel sound followed by a consonant. It mostly occurs at the end of lines in poetry. Imagery. Imagery often involves the senses, paints word pictures by combining literal and figurative language. Poetry may use metaphors, similes, or personification for comparisons. If the same metaphor is woven throughout the poem, it is called an extended metaphor. The creative use of sound devices such as alliteration, assonance, and onomatopoeia enhance the imagery. Figures of speech. Images are usually produced by figures of speech. These may be defined as the use of words, phrases, or expression in a manner other than their literal meaning to produce a special effect. Why I have included this in these slides is to give you extra notes that you can study before the exams and know exactly what figures of speech are and what they mean. It is something that you can use to prepare yourself before answering an unseen poem. It is important to know and understand the figures of speech used in poetry. Figures of speech and sound devices. Alliteration. The repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of 2 or more words. This is a sound device. Antithesis. Figure of speech in which phrases, sentences, ideas are strongly contrasted or balanced against each other. Apostrophe. A direct address to a person or thing, either present or abstract. Assonance, the repetition of the same vowel sound, either with the same or different consonants. Alliteration is your consonant sounds, assonance is your vowel sounds. Enjambment, a run on line where there is no punctuation at the end. The idea or sense of the line continues into the next line. Euphemism is a pleasant and indirect word or image to describe something unpleasant. For instance, we can say he has passed away instead of just saying he has died. It just sounds a bit softer. Hyperbole, to deliberately exaggerate something. Inversion, changing the normal word order for effect. Irony, implying the opposite of what is being said. Irony is dependent on the tone of voice. Litotes is an understatement or under-exaggeration. In other words, the opposite of hyperbole. Metaphor, an indirect comparison of a person, object, or thing. Metonymy. One name is used with the intention that it is closely linked with another thing. For example, the crown represents the king. Instead of saying the king, they can say the crown. Onomatopoeia, the sound something makes, is imitated using words. Oxymoron, a statement with two components which seem contradictory, but do make a point. A paradox, a statement or opinion which seems foolish or impossible, but contains truth. Personification, when inanimate objects or things are given human qualities. A pun is a deliberate play on words. A rhetorical question, a question used to attract the attention of the reader, but is not intended to be answered. Satire, a piece that uses humor to highlight the foolishness of something or someone. A simile, a direct comparison using the words like or as. Synecdoche, a part is used for the whole. For example, Australia won the cricket. In actual fact, it was the team that, the cricket team that won the cricket, not the country. But we say Australia won the cricket or South Africa won the World Cup. Tautology is the needless repetition of the same idea in different words. Pleonasm on the level of a sentence or sentences. Now we'll have a look at the types of poems you get. A ballad. A ballad is a poem that tells a story. The themes usually involve love, death, war, bravery, adventure, and action. The rhythm has a strong beat. A dramatic monologue, spoken in the first person. The speaker addresses an audience who does not speak or reply. From their words, we often learn more about the speaker than was intended, and the speaker's true character is revealed. An epic. An epic is a very long narrative poem, usually telling a story of some heroic deed, great person, or significant event. It uses many figures of speech, especially the epic simile. An elegy, a poem of mourning or lament that expresses sorrow, the one we have just discussed, remembrance. The poet honors someone who has died or something that has ceased to exist. They treat the subject seriously. The tone is always sad and mournful, and the rhythm slow. A lyric. These poems may have their origin in song and sound quite musical. It conveys the personal thoughts of the poet. They deal with a single theme or idea and are more emotive than the ballad. An ode is a long lyric poem that commemorates something special. It is written in rhymed stanzas, generally in the form of an address. It is exalted in both feeling and expression, and it may honor a person or an event. A satirical verse uses ridicule, irony, and sarcasm to correct a so-called folly or vice. The speaker makes fun of something to illustrate its faults. A sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. If you have any questions, please post them in the box on the right-hand side. I urge you to download these notes, especially the parts of the extra notes, additional notes I have just given, so that you are able to answer an unseen poem, but it will also help you in answering your seen poems. It's very important that you study these in detail. They are not included in your study guide, so please download these, then you have got the complete notes. If you are not registered with IMPAC, please contact us at info@impac.co.za. Thank you. I hope you learned something out of this, and good luck with your studies. Remember, once again, to download this presentation and to send us any questions if you need to know something else. Thank you and goodbye.